There's never been a bigger push than what we've seen this year to get African Americans to vote in Tuesday's presidential election. There's a lot at stake for the Black community, and infrequent voters are especially being urged to cast their ballots. The struggle African Americans endured in order to get the right to vote is the focus of a new exhibition at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. I spoke with the museum's CEO, Neil Barclay, about the collection of paintings, photographs, memorabilia, and documents titled Voting Matters. Okay, so let's talk about Voting Matters, this wonderful exhibition you guys have at the Wright.
Yeah, well, it opens September 27th, and it's a kind of interactive multimedia exhibit. It looks at the role of African Americans from pre-construction through the present day and the development of, what we think about as the right to vote, right? Was it created all by the in-house team? So it's our first exhibit that's been created totally in-house. It's designed by our in-house designers, and it's spectacular.
Yeah. So give me an idea of what kinds of things I might see at this exhibition.
We look at it in 5 parts. We kind of first start with the kind of Reconstruction and Reconstruction period, kind of lays the foundation for what was happening in the U.S. with, African Americans in general and the abolitionists and Frederick Douglass and those kinds of folks that were active in that time, and where we began to see African Americans winning local elections. You get into post-Reconstruction, though, we start to look at some of the things that were happening to disenfranchise African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, et cetera. We then look at the women's suffrage movement, and there in particular, after the passing of the 15th Amendment, some folks were given the right to vote, but not women. And so the role of African American women in kind of the women's suffrage movement is usually understated, but they are the first people that began to fight for women's rights to vote, because some men were given the right to vote, but not women at that point. And that kind of leads to the women's suffrage movement. So the abolitionist movement that's before that sort of looks at that. We then look at things like the Electoral College, very much in the news today, and kind of the racist underpinnings of that structure, right? And how selecting the president has resulted in sort of a disconnect between, I know you've talked about this a lot in your program, between, the popular vote and this sort of Electoral College that's put in place. And lastly, we look at gerrymandering. And, the sort of distinction that the Supreme Court recently made between political gerrymandering and sort of gerrymandering that's based on race, basically allowing gerrymandering to continue, right? And what we know as African Americans in particular, a lot of that is race-based, right? So that distinction is something without a meaning for many of us. But that's kind of the structure of the exhibition. It's got 5 different parts. It's in 2 of our main galleries, and it's really great. I hope folks will come out and see it.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing that always stands out to me about this issue is how American it is. This is an American story. It is maybe the American story. The journey of African Americans from property to full citizenship, and it's marked by the vote in many ways. It also strikes me that to have this exhibit right now is the right inflection point, right? It is the right.
It really is, isn't it? Right? I mean, probably more so than we might have anticipated, a year and a half ago when we, started to work on this. But certainly we knew this would be an important moment, right? But to your point, I think it's really important to understand this is really an American story. It's a great example of how African Americans kind of add to the dialogue about what it means to be American by telling more of our individual story. It has such resonance today because I think so few people understand where a lot of this disconnect between the popular vote and the Electoral College, where it actually came from. And we really look at that really critically in the exhibition, right?
Yeah. I tell this story a lot, and I find myself telling it more now to try to make the point about how all of this history lives so powerfully in our current lives. But, my father was born in 1933 in Mississippi. And he grew up and joined the Air Force right before the Korean War started. He served
Mhm.
2 or 3 years during the war in the military, and he came home to Mississippi when he was done and could not vote. Uh,
Mm.
not, couldn't vote for another 12 years, really, because it took the passage of the Voting Rights Act to make the 15th Amendment have any, you know.
Have it, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
tell that story because this is not some ancestor I read about in a book.
Right.
This
Right.
this is the first man I knew, and I think that's lost on a lot of people right now. People think this struggle for voting, this idea of trying to ensure that people's rights are respected is ancient.
Right. Right. Right.
Is,
It's old history to many people. It's really still
not.
lives today, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's the story of our lives as much
Very
as
much so.
our ancestors.
Very much so. And it's one of the reasons that we really, and this is sort of a general approach I'm taking to the exhibition design at the Wright now. So look for those issues that have a tremendous historical context, but are also so resonant today, right? As a way of giving voice to why people feel so deeply about some of these things. And your story is a great example. This is not like just a theoretical story. It's something that happened within your own family, and I think happened in a lot of people's family, right? And these struggle for these rights too was not just an African American story. Many whites and others really participated in this history as well. But it is sort of a way of talking about some of our shared history that still has resonance today, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any possibility that an exhibition like this could travel, for instance? I mean, you said that you guys
we actually designed it to be able to kind of travel within sections or as a whole. I mean, we have the space to do an exhibit of the scale, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of our sister institutions might only be able to take the women's suffrage section or the gerrymandering section or whatever. And so it's actually designed to be taken apart that way. And that's certainly our goal for it, is to kind of get it around to other people. We also have developed an app for it that really goes deeper into some of the issues. So you can also get that. That we developed, and it kind of looks at each of those sections and then gives you a lot more information if you might want it as well, right? Yeah. And then we're developing in this moment, we're developing kind of a virtual walkthrough as well, that people can kind of see it if they're not able to come into the museum. Right?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, the pandemic and museums. That's a whole other show.
So we've done a couple of things. One, we've extended it really, was scheduled, I'm trying to remember when it was originally scheduled to close. I think right after Black History Month or something like that. It's not going to be open until May to allow people to see this material even after the sort of election moment is there. In fact, it might be even more helpful to explain some things at that moment.
Depending on
what happens, So we're doing that, and we're also going to do a catalog, that will come out with a lot of this information in it that people will be able to get. So we're developing a lot of tools. But in terms of the museum, they have to register, so they go onto our site and make a reservation to come in at a particular time. I'm remembering they're in 20-minute intervals or something like that. And so then you can come in, because we are limited in the number of people that can be in the space at any given time. But as long as you register, it shouldn't be a problem. We're open now Thursdays through Sundays, so we're not open every day of the week, folks should know. We're hoping to extend that if we can. I don't know if we're going backwards or forward with the COVID issues, shall we say, but yeah. But that's what we're doing today.